must change our self-talk and inner dialogue so we can start to believe. A special thanks to our sponsor, Meaningful Expressions at m-expressions.com. They can take a concept, thought, or personal brand and turn it into a visual masterpiece that you can use to raise awareness about your passion or cause. They've certainly done that with our podcast website. And thank you for joining Johnny as you morph into a new you.
Hello, everybody. My name is Johnny Colloway, host of Morph Into a New You. I'm really excited about the guest we have today, Duane O'Kane. I've known Duane for years, and we're good friends, and now I'm going to let Duane introduce himself.
Oh my, how do I do that? I don't think I've ever been asked to introduce myself. Oh my, I'm up here in Canada. Johnny and I go back a long ways, as he said, back to the 90s when I was teaching workshops in Florida, which was my second home. I live in Vancouver. I've been in the personal growth field for probably 45 years. Initially really motivated by the human potential movement, not so much the therapeutic movement, but in those days, if you wanted to make a living in the human potential movement, you had to become a therapist too. And which led me to all kinds of adventurous activities in the therapeutic field, always kind of studying the cutting edge psychologies. In any event, I worked as a family therapist up here in the province of BC in an agency for a number of years, while taking, workshops on the weekend wherever I could go. I studied with Fritz Perls in the early 70s at the Esalen Institute down in California. I took primal therapy myself and all kinds of things like that. California was definitely the place to be. But by the early 90s, I had sunk into quite a serious clinical depression, which shocked the hell out of me. I didn't know where this came from, but I mean, it certainly made a whole lot of sense in retrospect. But climbing out of that depression, somebody handed me a Course in Miracles book, and I started studying it. And despite all my training in the field of psychology, in psychology, nothing could address the abject misery I was in, nor in any of its prescriptions of remedies or therapeutic pathways. All seemed to just be completely fruitless. But once I started studying A Course in Miracles, it really inspired me, and climbing out of my depression was utilizing most of those principles, of which then I applied, or I gave it a whole lot of practical application to. And that's really what gave birth to my organization called Clearmind International in the early 90s. And initially it was just bringing these principles into my private clients' sessions, but before I knew it, I had people lining up around the block to come into my room. And from that, I offered a workshop, and away it went. And now we are an international company with we're also an accredited college that trains. It's a 3-year counselor training program up here in Canada. We have over 180 students studying to be practitioners. We have a 16-acre retreat center up here in Vancouver. We teach my wife. I met my wife in 1996, and she happened to have a master's degree in clinical psych, which dovetailed perfectly into the work that I was doing. And together we have co-written, all the current programs, workshops, and we just published a book in November that reached 3 bestseller lists up here in Canada, called Real, The Power of Authentic Connection. We're very excited about that, to bring that to the world outside of Canada now. So then out of nowhere, all of a sudden, Johnny Colloway gives me a call and wants to touch base about his program here and the possibility of coming back down to Florida as well. So I'm very excited about this. It's wonderful to hear your voice, Johnny.
Yeah,
I wish I
Duane,
could-
just if I may for a moment, I know when I met you, my attraction to your work, I think the program, the workshop that I participated in was called The Awakening, and
Yep.
I actually ended up doing 2 or 3 of those, and
Yep.
my main attraction was A Course in Miracles, and your work with A Course in Miracles, and my question for you is, you were talking about the principles that you use to get through your depression. Were there any particular principles that really helped you with that process?
I think the one that was absolutely, well, there were a number, but the one that initially grabbed my attention, the course is divided into 3 different sections. There's the text, and then there's the workbook for students, and then the teacher's manual. But the workbook for students is a series of lessons. And lesson number 5 was, I'm not upset for the reasons I think. And that one just completely stunned me.
And the one that I tie in for my growth that ties right in with that is, I see only the past. And the combination of those two have been a big part of my process of like, okay, I think I'm angry about this, and it's usually something related to my past and not what's going on right now.
Right. And, it's a very, very humbling and empowering state of mind to stop and reflect enough to ask yourself the question, what actually am I upset about? And that invites 2 different levels of thinking. The first one is the psychological, and the next one is spiritual. But, in my mind, in the work we do, in our defense, in our ego defensive strategy, we've kind of reduced that the personalities in our strategic mind, our defensive mind, into hide, pretend, or defend. That we default to that controlling strategy in order to either get what we want, defend from anybody seeing who we are, or hide from the world completely, because in fear of being found out about what we fear we are underneath the whole mess. And in that hide, pretend, and defend activity, it produces all kinds of drama. Good guys and bad guys, who's right, who's wrong, pointed fingers, victim consciousness. And no matter what solutions we come up with there, none of them are ever going to change what's going on in the basement of our psyches. No matter how successful hide, pretend, and defend are, they will never sort out the ultimate dilemma that's going on inside of self. And so many psychologies, really have expertise in helping you cope with hide, pretend, or defend, or help you defend better, or help you pretend better, or help you hide better. But none of it addresses the ultimate dilemma. And it's very exciting when you get a group of people together that are willing to discard of hide, pretend, and defend, turn it in, so to speak. Like, here's my survival strategy personality, and I'm gonna bust it, because it does not deliver anything it promises, which is peace and happiness. And it just produces, as the Course in Miracles says, it just, defenses create what they defend against. And you never get outside of the very thing that it's trying to defend against. And we live in a hell. And the excitement of being able to take somebody's hand and redefine what the real problem is. And I mean, I'm talking about A Course in Miracles here. We don't, I'm not claiming to pontificate the principles of A Course in the work we do so much as be really highly influenced by them. So it's not the work we do isn't, reading passages ad infinitum from A Course in Miracles. It's more, what are the pioneering principles of the Course that need application, that you don't need to go to a study group to benefit from in your life, but more, what are these principles, and how are, Clearmind just feels like we have a mandate to bring those principles to the world. Well, and right now, I'm out in Canada watching all of you down there in the United States with everything that's going on in this completely wicked political system of, you want to talk about hide, pretend, and defend mentality, producing all in an attempt to try and level the playing field or make things okay, just creating more and more and more profound chaos.
Right. Well, I know in retrospect, one of the things that I appreciated and that benefited me the most, and I'd like to touch on this a little bit, is when I was working with you, is the experiential work that we did where we confronted those, I'll call them the lies of the ego that I know personally, I lived based on those lies. And by doing the work I did with you, I got to confront those lies and discover the truth. And I believe it was you and your Awakenings program that taught me about cellular memory and how that was where I needed to heal. And so, but we did that we did several, I think what we called at that time, reenactments.
Yes.
And we did some rebirthing or whatever the proper terminology is for that. It's just always what I called it. Do you still do those in your workshops?
Yeah, the reenactments are a very, very pivotal part of the Awakening Weekend, and yeah, it's called conscious connected breathing.
Yes, okay.
But the reenactments, it's all about moving from understanding the dilemmas of your past and talking about them, moving to talking from them. And that's what experiential really means. Most of us have a self-help book section. Most of your audience could probably sit here on my side and give a talk too about the psychology of defense and strategy and all of this. But it doesn't do anything if it never moves beyond the intellect. So when I was referring to the basement of our psyches, this suspicion of self that we made up, this guilt-ridden self that we think we are underneath everything, and there's psychological reasons for why that happened. We have to talk from it and not just about it. And so the part of us that made up what we fear about ourselves has to show up, as opposed to just talking about it. People could talk about it for years and years and years, read books ad infinitum, but until the part that made up what we fear about ourselves shows up, nothing really is going to significantly alter. And that's where the miracles really occur, is when the part that made it up shows up, meaning we come back in connection. Because without connection, nothing is going to change. So let me just explain that a little bit as you're referring to the awakening and the experiential piece of the reenactment. All of our problems happen in connection with another. Meaning when we're children and we're navigating how we're going to get acceptance and approval from, I'm just talking on a psychological level at this point, acceptance and approval from the love object or mom and dad. Things happened and we didn't get exactly what we wanted. And it was in that interaction with another that we make up something about ourselves. Like children have magical thinking. They make up, if there's a problem, it must be about self. And that's where the suspicion of self or the ego on a psychological level is birthed. Now, until contact happens again, correction will never occur. That part of ourselves gets segregated to the basement and gets replaced by hide, pretend, and defend. And there's never any contact again with the part that we've segregated to the basement. Like we say, nobody's going to meet this part of me again. I'm going to replace it with this pretend personality. And until we invite somebody into the basement with us, and really, like that's 20 years ago that you were in our workshops, we probably didn't know what the real determining factor of healing was then. It wasn't just healing our past. It was that, if you recall, the power of having a group of people actually with you, with the part of you that made all that stuff up. You have contact again, and in contact, new information can finally get back in.
I do remember the importance of having that group, and I remember how beautiful the group was that I got to participate with, and and all of that. And, you know, where I can personally tie into what you're talking about is at one point I was talking to a therapist of mine when I was going through a really, really dark time. And I told him the story from my past. And he said, wow, how many times have you rehearsed that story? And because I was so locked into the story, and as a result of that, he ended up helping me change the verbiage around the story and help me look behind that story to what was really going on. So,
what was the story beneath the story?
Yeah, what was beneath, and the thing was for me at that time is I was really invested in being a victim. Yeah. And every story I told from my past somehow led to the idea that I truly was a victim, which has been one of the biggest parts of A Course in Miracles in my personal growth, is where it talks about taking responsibility and how important it is to shift the perception. The show that we're doing here, Morph into a New You, for me, my approach is like, okay, if you want to change your life, first you have to change your mind about your life. And which for me meant moving out of victimhood into the power that is really mine. Yeah. And I got that started for me, and this is why I was so excited about talking with you today. That started for me with the work that I did with you and the work that we did in the Awakenings workshop.
Yes.
So my next question for you is, you mentioned your book. Could you give us the title of your book and tell us a little about the book itself?
Well, yeah, it's called Real, The Power of Authentic Connection. It's on Amazon.com and Indigo, I think. It's really a summary of the Awakening workshop. We really walk someone. It's actually, you know, experiential book, meaning there's exercises to do all the way through. And like in the workshops, you know, Catherine, my wife, and I, we present our story as well as you've done in your book. Like, my story is the window into the principles. It's the most powerful way of teaching principles, is to actually illustrate it by what I went through personally. So, and also in our relationship of what we had to meet in each other to have our relationship become what A Course in Miracles calls a holy relationship. Like, what does that really mean? And so we walk through that whole thing with a big focus on our relationship, using that as a microcosm for what happens in most relationships. You know, most relationships reach a crisis. It's inevitable that a relationship, it developmentally, it has to reach a crisis. Most people think when it reaches the crisis that it's evidence that the relationship may be over, or it's the wrong one, and they give up, or they die inside. When in fact, the crisis that happens in a relationship is more a crisis of the deal that was constructed between two people when you first meet. When you meet somebody and you have that romantic excitement, you're actually on a rescue mission. You rescue each other from your basements. You think you found the one that is going to either give you everything you need, or you'll have rules in a relationship so you'll always feel safe. And that's bound to collapse because it's still not addressing what's really going on. Relationships were not designed to be rescue missions. Relationships were designed to be helpful missions, meaning instead of rescue me from what I fear I am in my basement by being this or giving me that, it's more help me heal what I believe is going on in my basement about my worth. And so we walk through that whole thing in our book around that whole developmental passage we went through, where in the first year or two of our relationship, way back in the late 90s, I had an affair because I was scrambling. I just could not meet who I was in my basement about letting somebody love me. It was a profound process we went through of letting each other know who each other were without holding the other responsible anymore for my emotional, spiritual, or psychological salvation. So the book is really deep that way, and it also, really teaches the theory of what all our workshops are all about.
So, Duane, you touched on the importance of transforming into a holy relationship that the Course in Miracles speaks of. I also know that the Course in Miracles speaks of all relationships start as special relationships. So in your book, do you talk about special relationships and what they are and how we move from that into the holy relationship?
Yeah, but we don't leave it at just simply reducing it down to the special or the holy relationship. We, because we're in the field of psychology, we break it down into a lot more of the dynamics even within the special relationship and the holy relationship. So, like I just mentioned, the first negotiation in a relationship is the special one, but how I just referred to it was it's a rescue mission, where that special relationship is based on rescue me, and so the book goes into a microcosmic detail of all the different dynamics of all the different rescue missions that go on within that special relationship. But like you said, the holy relationship is the healing special one. No relationships start off as a holy relationship in the romantic sense. They all start off with a special relationship. That's what the attraction is all about. I'm seeing someone that's going to give me a good ending to a bad old story.
Right. And I know for myself, when I facilitate a course class, of course, a special relationship comes up and everybody immediately wants to make that a wrong thing. And it's not, in my mind. And the way I've defined a special relationship is anytime a perceived need is being met. So I really like that concept of a rescue mission because, I need you to make me whole or to make me complete or to bring me to a level of peace. But that need is, the perception is the need is being met through you, and it's never really being met. So it is very subject to a breakdown.
If you think about it, like what else are fights or conflict about in a relationship other than I am now going to lodge a complaint about you not satisfying the end of your end of the deal of rescuing me.
Right.
I mean, if you really think about it, here we are, human beings walking on the face of this planet. Like, why is this person responsible for my happiness? They can't be. They never were. They aren't. And yet, that's what we will make someone be to replace everything. We're looking for, as the Course in Miracles talks about a lot, we're looking for magnitude, and we deserve to experience magnitude, but you'll never find it in form or in a body or in one person. Like, it can't be reduced to that. And yet that's where we seek it.
Yeah, well, for me, I've come to believe, and I don't want to say I've come to a conclusion, but I've come to believe that anything that I think, I mean, whether it's a job or a romantic relationship or whatever I think I need to complete me or to make me whole or to make me a more loving child of God is until I realize I don't need that, then I'm kind of hanging out there on the edge.
Yeah, and we have to be willing to go, if there's Course in Miracles students listening, there's two levels to the Course, and it always puzzles me why people think there might only be one. And that is that you could just change your mind. I don't need that, so therefore I'm just going to stop needing that. That's the first level of the Course. That's correct. That's right mind thinking. But the second level of the Course is to actually go in and inspect every nook and cranny of that system and where it came from in your life. Like, what is my history around this lack that's going on inside of me? Where did that occur beyond a spiritual level, a psychological level? What happened in my childhood? What happened in my life? That this is what I've concluded, that there's something missing in me, and therefore this is the one that has to fulfill it. The part that made up that there was something lacking has to show up, meaning the lacking part has to speak. Where did that start? And rather than just rather than just labeled as wrong mind.
Right.
And let's go to the good stuff. That's called spiritual bypass. That's called leapfrogging to God.
I'm so glad you said that, because I was just thinking as you were talking that I've known so many people that get involved with A Course in Miracles because they think they're going to be able to bypass the work that's needed to be done. When my experience has been, A Course in Miracles is just a tool to help me do the work that needs to be done. But I still have to do the work. The deep internal, what I call investigation of my thought system, my belief system, and all of the lies that I've told myself over the years, I have to really investigate those. And A Course in Miracles does not keep me from doing that. It just gives me other tools to help me do that.
And yet the Course really guides us that way. Like this, again, I remember sitting with Ken Wapnick, and we both agreed. He says, I don't know what Course a lot of people are reading. Like why they don't understand the second level of the Course. You read The Fear of Redemption in chapter 13. I mean, that really speaks quite profoundly about all the different levels. I advise anybody listening to really give that a really good read and see all the different levels of defense and how far we have to go with our inspection. So I agree with you. I mean, there's certain people in the fraternity of A Course in Miracles that would continue to kind of sell this idea of, well, everything is just an illusion, therefore I don't even have to deal with anything. That's so irresponsible. Like we do live in a world, and this is where heaven wants to show up, is in this world, and we have to do our work in this world, and we have to be accountable for who we are in this world and what we've done so far. And a lot of this is, before we take responsibility for ourselves, we have to be accountable for ourselves first. Like what messes have I made in this world already in my defenses that I have to clean up, rather than just dismissing and just concluding that it's all an illusion anyways, so it never, or nothing happened. Well, something did happen.
I'm so grateful you brought that illusion part up. I've actually been frustrated several times in Course in Miracles classes when somebody gets stuck on it being an illusion, and I just want to say, you know what? It may be an illusion, but the only way I can escape from it is to deal with the reality of it. And you can't tell a mother who just lost her child and is grieving to the nth degree, you can't say, oh, it's okay, it's just a dream anyway. No, it's very real to her.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, you can't just pass it off as it's a dream. You got to deal with the reality of the dream.
Yeah. That's like let's take another good look at that. Like, well, my interpretation of that isn't that when it says we made the whole world up. Well, we do. We make up a world in our mind. Doesn't mean there isn't one. It just means that we're incapable of understanding, having a direct contact with reality, because our fears and our defenses and our ego mind is so alive that it buffers us from the world that we cannot ultimately experience, or very rarely. I mean, the Course calls that the holy instant, when you finally do. But there is, that's a complete misinterpretation of the principles of the Course to just simply conclude that it's all simply an illusion. It just means that we have made a world up to replace the world that does exist.
Right. I love that. I love that. And, for me, A Course in Miracles is the foundation of everything I stand on. But there's the thing that I really enjoy, and the thing that I've benefited the most in my work with you, is how well you tie the psychological into the spiritual, and how you tie the two of them together to the point where they're married. And like, you can't really heal just with one or just with the other. They need to be combined.
That's right. Thank you for that. I really appreciate you saying that. And if there's anything that Catherine and I do, I think it is kind of like you say, marrying those principles, because they're the same if once they're totally unwrapped and taken a good look at. They're the same thing.
Well, the beauty of that for what we're doing here right now is the platform that we're getting to speak from right now is Mental Health News Radio Network. And when I met with Kristen Sananta Walker, when I talked with her and I brought forth the spirituality of it, she became immediately curious as to how the spiritual and the psychological can tie together. And when I told her about it, she's like, okay, we need to do a show about, we need to have a podcast on here on a regular basis where we're introducing those two together so that the other people can benefit from both.
I'll give you an example of how easily those two things can get bridged together experientially. You know, I think, I don't know if you were at that my first trip to Florida, I got invited to go to a Course in Miracles group, to lead the group for an hour or whatever it was, because they were interested in this bridging of the experiential with psychology and spirituality. So I came in and I just had heard everybody check in first, and for the most part there was a whole lot of that spiritual bypass stuff going on around. You know, we're already in heaven, everything's perfect, and there's nothing but love here, and it was a bit of a competition about who could love the best, or who knew the Course the most, or anyways. So they asked me, so could you demonstrate this gap between spirituality and psychology? Like, why? Like, we don't need to discuss our past, they said, basically. I said, okay, so let me demonstrate. And I just had everybody turn to the person beside them, one-on-one, turn their chairs so you're facing someone, and look into somebody's eyes for a minute. And you wouldn't believe the anxiety that instantly cropped up. Fears cropped up, like, when is this over? I can't stand, this is too much. Like, I don't want to look into somebody's eyes. And we then spoke for the next 59 minutes about that minute, about what everybody went through, and how psychology, like what they ran into, was, you know, spiritual dilemmas manifesting in psychological experience, where we fear each other, and they all had what we call just like whens in their past. Of what happened with mom or dad or your past lover or whatever it was. Like, I'm frightened of having contact because you might see something in me, and I'd rather just avoid eye contact so you don't. And it was profound, absolutely profound, what a simple little exercise like that, how it demonstrated how active and unresolved all this psychological stuff actually is, despite their profound knowledge of A Course in Miracles, that they hadn't been doing the deeper work with it.
Right. Well, you know, I don't think I was at your first workshop in Florida, but I think I was at your second one. I remember doing that exercise with you, and it was amazing. It was amazing. And actually, at that time, I was, I'd already been studying Course in Miracles for a few years, but I was still kind of caught up in trying to do the bypass. I didn't want to have to. I didn't want to have to do the work. I didn't want to have to look at the demon idea in me, and it's like, okay, let's just let this be a dream. I can ignore the hurt.
You know, that's like a relationship with the Course in Miracles could be this, is like a special relationship initially too.
Yes.
Like
Yes. Yes.
Rescuing magically. And that's, of course, talks a lot about the difference between magic and miracles. I mean, that's magic. Like, we think that we're magically going to not have to deal with anything, and that's got to collapse.
I have known so many people over the years that get involved with the Course in Miracles, and they love it in the beginning because in the beginning it is a bypass. It's new, it's refreshing, it's another way to look at it, it's a way of not doing the work, and then once they get to the point where they realize, oh no, I still got to do that work, then they leave.
Yeah.
They leave because they find out, in my opinion, they find out that studying A Course in Miracles is not like taking a pill. It's not like I read this and I'm done. So one of the things I always kind of chuckle at is when I mention A Course in Miracles to somebody and they look at me and they kind of wave a hand and say, oh, I read that.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay. And you think that's all there is to it, is just reading it? because the
Yeah.
practical application of the principles of it is where the healing occurs,
Yeah,
not just reading the book.
precisely. I mean,
So
yeah.
go ahead.
Like, I mean, the book was written about healing a very, very, Helen Schickman and Bill Thetford's relationship. Like, it was all about what was going on in real time between the two of them. And that was very emotional and psychological. Like she had to deal with herself on a very, very deep level. So, there was no spiritual bypass going on. It wasn't birthed out of a spiritual bypass. It was birthed out of a very painful dilemma.
If I'm not mistaken, it kind of got started with the basic thought of there's got to be another way.
Yes.
Yeah, and that request prompted the answer to come, which Helen ended up writing about, and we now call that A Course in Miracles.
Yeah. Yeah. And it was in that, when Bill said, okay, I will join you, but it was in that joining that it wasn't just about scribing the course. It was, then their relationship started.
Right.
And she was revealing her attachment to Bill.
So, Duane, I'm gonna change directions here with you just a little bit. Are you doing the Awakenings workshops in the United States?
Well, yes, we're more in the Northwest at the moment, and at the same time, we long to return to California or to Florida. As I mentioned to you before, I think that our sponsor there had moved to Sweden, back to Sweden, and you had gestured that you'd like to see the Awakenings return to Florida. We certainly would like to come back.
Well, you and I can talk about that individually at another time as to how I can help you get those back into Florida, because I would really love to. Actually, I'd love to see them all over the United States, because Lord only knows they're needed. And I really want to emphasize how much they meant to me and how much they helped me in my healing process. In my book, The Dedication, I wrote how my dad, how he was the ogre of my youth, became the reigning angel of my life. And that was all based on what I learned, starting with the Awakenings and then my continued work with A Course in Miracles. And my whole perception of him and his purpose in my life changed drastically. And a big part of that was the reenactment work that I did with you guys in the Awakenings.
Yeah, that was a powerful evening for sure.
Yeah,
right?
Huge.
Where you completely became that boy again and relived that experience and invited every feeling, every thought, everything that you made up about yourself that so impacted the rest of your life, that we had to peel back to release him so that he could speak and finally complete whatever you were going through at the time. Like, that was very powerful.
Well, just a quick little story about the power of that reenactment that you're referring to. The gentleman that played my dad in that reenactment, played the part of my dad, when we were through, he wasn't really sobbing, but he had tears rolling down his cheek. And I said, Don, what's going on? He said, while we were doing that, I had the most incredible vision. And I said, okay, let me know. And he said, I saw you and your dad before you were coming here to this earthly experience, and you were asking him to be this monster for you. And he was saying, I can't, I love you too much. And you said, it's because I know you love me that much that I want you to be the one to play this part for me. And Don said it was just incredible. And I believe that my dad and I made a pact long before I came into this Johnny Colloway experience that he was going to help me learn about forgiveness. And that's the beauty of the whole thing for me, is how he became a bearer of a gift instead of my greatest challenge, which he was my greatest challenge. But when I made that transformation from him being this ogre that was his whole life, I thought was, and my whole life was about him brutalizing me, and then he became someone that was bringing me a gift. That was that gave me a freedom that I can't even explain.
Yeah, it profoundly widened the context of moving beyond just being a victim to the monster dad to inviting a whole different level of understanding, not just of why you came into his life, but also to I'm sure to actually understand your father too, beyond the monster.
Right.
About
absolutely
what was driving him. What was his story behind that story? Well, that was his defender, that was the monster, but what was he defending? It's
right.
like, if that guard, what is the guard guarding?
Right.
Is really real story that we're after.
Right. Well, one of the things that I've learned about my father is that his anger was his defense mechanism, and it came from a
Yes.
place of absolute terror. And
Yes.
in that place, I believe today, based on the things that I've learned in so many different areas, I believe today that anger was his scream for somebody to love him and to help him.
Precisely.
So, Duane, if I want the listeners to get this, and I want to understand this or know this. If someone wanted to help you facilitate an awakenings or provide that in their area, how would they go about that?
Well, contact me first. My email is Duane, Duane, O'Kane, Okane, at Clearmind.com. And before anybody could do anything with Clearmind, they would have to take the Awakening Workshop. That's the front door to our whole organization, including our counselor training program. But people that become facilitators in our program take the Awakening, and then they take our counselor training program as well to get officially registered as a therapist, blah, 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 all those things, in order to be able to facilitate professionally in one of our workshops.
Okay, so what if somebody, let's say they didn't want to be a part of facilitating, they just wanted to help you find the space and...
Oh, yeah. Yes, I didn't listen correctly. That would be the beginning, is to either come and take an awakening in one of our other cities so that you really know it makes sense for you. And then we can talk about, that's how Clearmind spread all around the world, is just like that. Somebody wants to take the awakening, they fly in, and they are so taken by it that they want to extend it to others. And then we start talking about how we can support them to support us and support the people that want to come to workshops in their local city. And so that's why we are in, Portland and Seattle and Calgary and Vancouver and Toronto and London and Newcastle and Liverpool and Birmingham and Cork and Dublin and Stockholm and Berlin. Wow. That's how it happened.
Well, I just want to say to anybody listening that if you haven't ever done the deep work, that the Awakenings is a great way to find forgiveness for the hurts that hold you back. So
yeah, if they want to check it out any further, our website is clearmind.com. And everything you need to know is on there, everything we have. We also have a ton of videos, of hour-long lectures that we've given that people can watch so they can get even more, get a better idea of everything we're talking about. Great.
And I guess my other question is, where do you go from here? Where does Duane O'Kane go from here? What else are you doing? What is your vision?
Well, I think the, I really want to pay attention to where our book wants to take us right now. I don't need Clearmind to develop or expand beyond it where it is necessarily, although I totally invite it. I'm very happy with the way it is. But I think the amount of people that we can reach through our book will exceed the amount of people we can reach through direct experience and workshops. because we'd really like we have students in our counselor training program from all over the world, because it's an online program as well. By the way, I didn't mention that, like half the students we have a video conferencing, very, very exotic software where we have cyber classrooms where we're all connected and all talking and all sharing and everything else. I think that the next step is to speak to more people in a larger context.
Great, great. I'm going to have to start wrapping this up, so I want you to reiterate your contacts and how people can reach you and find out more about you. And I can't say enough about how much I appreciate getting to have this conversation with you. It's really nice just to reconnect with you, because you and your work helped me be the man that I am today. And without your work, I never would have written Dragons to Butterflies.
No, I'm very touched by that. Johnny, you're a beautiful, wonderful man. I long and look forward to actually giving you a big, huge bear hug, Canadian bear hug next time. But
I remember those bear hugs. I will look forward to that.
I'm a big hugger. Clearmind.com, Clearmind.com. I mean, everything you want to find out is on there. If you want to contact me personally, it's Duane, Duane, O'Kane, Okane, at clearmind.com, and we can go from there.
Great, Duane. And I also want to say I really hope we get to do this again.
Okay, everybody, thanks for listening. Remember, never give up, always keep it real, and take time to smell the roses. And please sit down and watch a butterfly. Keep up with all that we are doing by going to morphintoanewyou.com. Thank you very much.
Welcome to Morph Into a New You, part of MHNRnetwork.com. Your host, Johnny Colloway, is the author of several books, including Taming the Dragon, Dragons to Butterflies, The Metamorphosis of a Man, and The Bridge. He will be having conversations with people from all walks of life. Healing really is an inside job that transforms you to become a better version of you. We must change our self-talk and inner dialogue so we can start to believe. A special thanks to our sponsor, Meaningful Expressions at m-expressions.com. They can take a concept, thought, or personal brand and turn it into a visual masterpiece that you can use to raise awareness about your passion or cause. They've certainly done that with our podcast website. And thank you for joining Johnny as you morph into a new you.
Hello, everybody. My name is Johnny Colloway, host of Morph Into a New You. I'm really excited about the guest we have today, Duane O'Kane. I've known Duane for years, and we're good friends, and now I'm going to let Duane introduce himself.
Oh my, how do I do that? I don't think I've ever been asked to introduce myself. My, I'm up here in Canada. Johnny and I go back a long ways, as he said, back to the 90s when I was teaching workshops in Florida, which was my second home. I live in Vancouver. I've been in the personal growth field for probably 45 years. Initially really motivated by the human potential movement, not so much the therapeutic movement, but in those days, if you wanted to make a living in the human potential movement, you had to become a therapist too. And which led me to all kinds of adventurous activities in the therapeutic field, always kind of studying the cutting edge psychologies. In any event, I worked as a family therapist up here in the province of BC in an agency for a number of years, while taking, workshops on the weekend wherever I could go. I studied with Fritz Perls in the early 70s. At the Esalen Institute down in California. I took primal therapy myself and all kinds of things like that. California was definitely the place to be. But by the early 90s, I had sunk into quite a serious clinical depression, which shocked the hell out of me. I didn't know where this came from, but I mean, certainly made a whole lot of sense in retrospect. But climbing out of that depression, somebody handed me a Course in Miracles book, and I started studying it. And despite all my training in the field of psychology, in psychology, nothing could address the abject misery I was in, nor in any of its prescriptions of remedies or therapeutic pathways. All seemed to just be completely fruitless. But once I started studying A Course in Miracles, it really inspired me, and climbing out of my depression was utilizing most of those principles, of which then I applied, or I gave it a whole lot of practical application to. And that's really what gave birth to my organization called Clearmind International in the early 90s. And initially it was just bringing these principles into my private clients' sessions, but before I knew it, I had people lining up around the block to come into my room. And from that, I offered a workshop, and away it went. And now we are an international company with we're also an accredited college that trains